Hello, Taylor Ellwood here, and tonight we are going to be talking about pathworking and my approach to pathworking, and I'm going to share an example of some pop culture magic pathworking. Um, First thing I want to note is I want to refer you to a great resource that's helped me with pathworking quite a bit, and it's this book, Magical Imagination by Nick Farrell. It's a really good book on pathworking that I like. He presents some different psychological techniques and how they can be merged with pathworking. Um, I will say that not everyone would agree with Nick Farrell's approach, and some people would say, well, you're not supposed to psychologize it. I don't necessarily feel he does that in his defense, but I do think that he just draws on certain principles of like hypnosis and psychology that can actually aid in deeper pathworking experiences. That said, another author that I really like, RJ Stewart, does a lot of work with pathworking, and what he does is he uses stories a lot in his approach to pathworking. And again, I think both approaches are perfectly valid. I mean, in Nick's case, basically what he's doing is he's creating scripts. So hey, why not? So anyway, that little bit of book promotion aside, I did want to talk a bit about my approach to pathworking, and I would say that I do define pathworking as a form of meditation. It's a way to create a visualization, if you will, that allows you to use specific types of imagery in order to construct a virtual reality that you're working in, for the purposes of connecting with that imagery and also with the spirits that are behind that imagery. When you're working with like a deity or God, you might use specific relevant imagery in that path working to help you connect with that deity or God. Or if you're working with a demon or an angel or something else along those lines, or if you're working with a specific type of mythology, let's say you're working with Greek mythology, you might draw upon certain heroes of Greece, Agamemnon or Hercules or Achilles or other relevant beings in order to help construct the path working. And really, the purpose of pathworking, at least in my experience, is that pathworking is partially a way to connect with the spirits. It's also a way to do research, to learn from the spirits. I mean, that's how I've always treated it. When I look at my pathworking, I kind of see it as a form of reverse invocation, in the sense that I'm invoking myself into the mythology or into the deity or into whatever it is that I'm working with. And as a result, I'm getting this direct transmission slash experience from them that I'm then bringing back into myself and using as a way to connect further with them and to develop rituals and spells and other relevant things along those lines. So for me, that's kind of how I define path working in a nutshell, and the way that I approach working with it. For those of you watching this video, feel free to comment and share your own definitions and experiences with pathworking. I'm always game to see, what it is that other people are doing and how they approach things. But that's pretty much my approach to pathworking. So what I want to do is I want to share an example of a pop culture magic pathworking, and I've been thinking about this a bit because I'm going to be doing an upcoming video series here in the next few weeks on some pop culture magic work that I'm doing, and I'm gonna do a ritual of sorts. I'm gonna be brutally honest; it's not gonna be that exciting for you guys. You're gonna watch and you're gonna be like, "This is how he does magic," and it's gonna be like, "Yep, it's." But that's okay, I mean, my approach to magic is much more hmm, is much more solitary than group oriented. And so it's not one of those things where I'm necessarily going out of my way to create this huge extravaganza when it comes to ritual work, because pretty much doing everything I do on my own. I mean, I have people that I work with on occasion, but it's a rare and few far between kind of thing, if you really want to be honest about it. So, with that said, let me share with you that lately I've been thinking about this idea of doing a pop culture magic ritual. One of the members of the Magical Experiments Facebook group said, hey, it would be really cool if you did a pop culture magic ritual on video. And I'm like, I don't know, do I really want to do that? And I thought, you know what, why not? Why not challenge myself a bit? And so I began to think about, like, well, what pop culture am I going to work with? And in the next video that I shoot, which unfortunately isn't going to be for another 2 weeks because I have to take care of some family matters next week, so I won't be doing my usual videos. But I'm going to be discussing my rationale for choosing the specific pop culture that I've chosen, and some of the research that I'm doing around it. But this week I thought, we'll consider this our prequel video, right? It's kind of leading up to this pop culture magic series. And in this case, I've decided to work with the pop culture of Stranger Things. I was recently introduced to this series. My wife had watched it, and she's like, "Oh, you'd love it. You should check it out. It's full of '80s reference and all that." And I'll admit I was initially reluctant because I've never liked horror films or things like that. And she's like, "It's cheesy horror." I'm like, I don't know. Okay. I started watching it a few months ago, the first season and the second season. I just binge watched them, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is freaking cool. AD&D, '80s references galore. This is like pop culture paradise. So, and then I just recently watched the third season. And so I began to think about, like, if I want to work with a pop culture, what pop culture would I want to work with? I could go with the established stuff that I've done, like the pop culture Tahara or some of those things along those lines. But I thought, you know what? I want to do something new. Um, if I'm going to do a challenge, why not challenge myself in a couple different ways? Why not do something new with some pop culture? And Stranger Things is the thing I ended up gravitating on, partially because I grew up during the '80s, so I totally get those '80s references, and partially because I find the whole story and premise interesting. And so I've been thinking about, like, how I would construct a path working and, like, what I would work with. Am I going to work with, for example, am I going to work with the spirit, the pop culture spirit of the kids and Elle? Or am I going to work with the pop culture spirit of Hopper and some of the adult characters? Or am I going to work with the pop culture spirit of the essentially the other dimensional being, the mind, what they've referred to in the show is the, like, the Demogorgon and the Mind Flayer and the Demodocs. And I began to think about it, and I'm like, I want to work with the other dimensional beings, so I'm going to do that. Now, the thing about Stranger Things is the other dimensional beings aren't exactly friendly to humans. So you might wonder, well, like, what the heck is Taylor off his rocker? Why would he want to work with those beings? But it's like, for me, I'm fascinated by the other dimensional aspect of it. I'm also fascinated with those particular beings and what their motivation is. And I've also got some ideas as to how I could employ them for my own purposes. But in order to do that, I am going to be doing a path working. I'm not going to be doing it tonight. I am going to make it part of my pop culture video series, though. And so what I'm going to really do is what I'm doing as part of my research is I'm rewatching a bit of the show, but what I'm doing is really rewatching the first season. And the reason why is because that's where the first and second seasons is where you spend a lot of the time in the actual dimension, that they call the upside down. And what I'm doing, my focus for the pathworking is actually basically going into and experiencing the upside down and using that as a way to connect with one of those spirits. What I'm working with in terms of the pathworking is the imagery. If we look at the imagery of the upside down, the imagery of the upside down is a place that kind of mirrors our own Earth, our own planet, our own plane, but it's a darker version. It's a thing where it's in a state of decay, but at the same time, it's also in a state of, it's like a state of breaking down of the alchemical state of putrefaction, right? Where it's a breakdown of things, but at the same time, it's also kind of a refinement of things in a weird kind of way. I think of it as a place of recycling in a very real sense, like it's a recycling of things. It's inimical to our plane of existence, And yet at the same time, there's this interesting intersection where you can kind of see this one plane of existence intersecting with the other, and one necessarily recycling the other. So there's that aspect of it to me, because then I think, how could this be applied from a pop culture perspective to, for example, recycling and regeneration and putrefaction, as it were. And of course, then I've also got to think about the actual beings that I'm going to be working with. Which one am I going to work with? Am I going to work with the demo dog? Probably not. Am I going to work with the Demogorgon? A strong possibility. Am I going to work with a Mind Flayer? Not sure on that one, because I definitely know it's hostile to humans in the series. And I'm willing to guess, as a pop culture entity, it's probably hostile to humans, period. Of course, we could say the same thing with the Demogorgon. And really, realistically, all of those beings are extensions of it. So, we have to really think about that one carefully. So I'm kind of mulling it over. I'll admit that depending on how the pathworking goes, that's going to determine where I'm going to go with that pop culture. Am I going to continue to try and work with that, or am I going to go to safer harbors, as it were? But you know what? There is no reward without risk. There is no magical experimentation without being willing to do things differently than what would be expected. And sometimes it's worthwhile to work with the villains, as it were. And in this case, that's what I'm looking at. So when I create this pathworking, I'm very much going to be creating this specific experience with Stranger Things in terms of the environment that I'm crafting, and in terms of the actual spirits that I'm potentially working with. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. That's kind of what I'm doing right now, in preparation for this little video series that I'm going to be doing here starting next month. And I thought, hey, why not take the topic of pathworking and merge it with that? So consider this the prequel launch to that series, where we're going to be talking quite a bit about pop culture magic and how to work with it. And I'll be sharing with you what it looks like to actually create a pop culture magic working and or possibly even system. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. But for now, I've just kind of wanted to give you an idea of at least one of the initial steps that you take, which is, crafting a pop culture pathworking that draws upon the mythology of the pop culture that you're going to work with. All right, have a great evening. Take care, and I will talk to you guys in a couple weeks.